Everyone, welcome to the Hello everyone, welcome to the July speaker series. We are featuring Scott Everett from the Nez Perce tribe and Kemo Scott, also from the Nez Perce tribe. And today we are presenting the Steelhead Kelt Project, hosted by the Salmon Orca Project. And we are thrilled to have you here today as we embark on a journey to explore interesting topics of the intersection of steelhead and kelt and the significant role they play in salmon restoration. Before we begin, let us take a moment and acknowledge the ancestral homelands on which we stand. We recognize and pay respect to the indigenous people and tribal nations who have been stewards of these lands for generations. The Salmon Orca Project firmly believes in the power of collaboration and unity. Through this webinar series, we aim to foster a platform where tribal leaders, community members, experts, and stakeholders from various backgrounds can come together. We share experiences and work toward innovative and equitable solutions. And now I will go ahead and introduce more personally Scott Everett and Kemo Scott. Scott Everett, who is in the blue polo shirt on the image there. Scott has over 26 years of professional experience in fisheries with the Nez Perce tribe. This experience includes research proposal development, report writing, professional presentations, project management, field data collection, database analysis, and anadromous fishes and fish culture activities. He's worked on the Snake River White Sturgeon Abundance Monitoring, Coho Project Management, or Coho Salmon Reintroduction, and was the assistant manager for the Nez Perce Tribal Fish Hatchery. For the last 13 years, he's been the tribe's project leader for the Steelhead Kelt Reconditioning program. Scott graduated from the University of Idaho with a couple of fisheries degrees. He enjoys fishing and all forms of outdoor recreation, especially when they involve water. He also has 5 children and 2 grandchildren who find plenty of fun ways to spend his spare time.
For sure.
Thank you for being here, Scott.
Thank you.
We also have Kemo Scott. His government name is Kemo Scott. His Nimipu name is Kokot Haihai, White Raven. Born on April 7th, 1981 in Meridian. Ms. Kemo is Mr. Not sure what the abbreviation is there. I'm sorry. Kemo is from Whitebird Band. He received college degrees in graphic and business management. Kemo has worked on a variety of different jobs. He is also interested in several hobbies. At the moment, they include painting, building automotive, and gardening. He is in his 4th season at Fisheries Agricultural Technician for the Kelt Project. Thank you, Kemo.
Thank you.
Would either of you like to add anything before we begin?
You nailed it.
Great, thank you.
Meridian, Mississippi. You'll pick that up shortly.
Thank you. So as we're all here today, some of us are wondering what the Steelhead Kelt Reconditioning Project is. Would you like to go ahead and tell us what that is?
Sure. So you bring up that first graphic with the game board, kind of walk through the life history of steelhead. As most people know, salmon, they spawn and they die right afterward. Steelhead have this life history trait called iteroparity that allows them to spawn again. So you can get that graphic up there.
That's not. There it is.
Yeah, get her just a little bit. There we go. So if we start up at the upper left, the steelhead will start their adult migration back upstream. They got to get past dams, a whole bunch of sources of different predation. Once they successfully spawn, they are now considered a kelt. And a portion of these fish will actually turn around, head back down to the ocean and start all over again. On their way back downstream, this is where we grab them, intercept them, and bring them into the kelp reconditioning program. And if you look at those two green pathways, those are the two shortcuts that we provide during reconditioning. If they are mature after their first 6 months, we'll put them back in the river in October. Some do not remature in that first year. So we hold them for another 12 months for a total of 18 months and put them out the following fall. And so they're released to coincide with the natural upstream migration of the steelhead. And that, in essence, is what we do with kelp reconditioning. We're trying to provide a shortcut to eliminate a whole bunch of mortality that these fish would experience if just left in the river. And there's a lot of components that are involved in that. And one of them, one of the biggest ones, is getting our hands on some fish. And Kemo is going to talk a little bit about what's involved with collection. How can we get our hands? What do we do when we collect these fish?
When we collect, we have 4 interns, or anybody. We have a group of 4 people, guys and girls, and we will use dually trucks, and we'll have 2 teams, and we'll split up, and we'll use we'll go to 3 different dam sites. We've got the Lower Granite, we've got the Little Goose, and we've got the Lower Monumental. And what we'll do is we'll get in these dually trucks, which have 500-gallon tanks, and we will drive down to these dams, fill up the water once we get to these dams, and then we will go through our collection process. Now, the fish will already be down there waiting for us. We won't have to separate through, catfish and bass and salmon. They're actually just all steelhead for us waiting. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to separate and look through all these fish, and we're going to get out the best fish that we can bring home. It's all females, and they have to be drop their babies already. We cannot bring home no babies. So the idea is to get the most perfect fish that will be able to survive in our tanks for the amount of time it takes to produce. So now that we get to the dam sites, we will put them what's called clove oil. We'll put clove oil inside of these a knockout tank, and what it does is it puts the fish to almost asleep. It kind of paralyzes it, but it's somewhat awake. So that allows us to move this fish without it fighting us. So after a couple of minutes that this fish is asleep or sedated, we will put this fish in a tube and weigh it. We will put it on a measuring board and get a measurement. We will, if the fish is going to go home and recondition, we will give it emamectin, which is, it treats parasites. And also we'll give it Oxytet. It's another medicine that it treats bacteria. So once we give these 2 shots, and then we will give it a pit tag, and which is like basically like a driver's license. Anywhere in the world that this fish will go to, this pit tag will identify that fish, when it was tagged, and everything about it. So the fish that we do not collect, we will put them back into the river, and they will go to the ocean. But the fish that we keep, we will put inside of our 500-gallon tanks, and then we will turn on oxygen. We'll have to give them a certain level of oxygen. And you don't want to give them too much because it can cause problems. You don't give it too little, because they'll suffocate. So you actually have to check them 2 different stops that will check our fish, make sure that the oxygen settings are good. And before we take off, we will give them salt and slime. And that will be inside the water, kind of helps them on the trip to Dorshak. Once we get to Dorshak, we will, the crew that's at Dorshak will scan that fish and make sure that that fish is on site. And then they will take that fish and put it inside of a tank, which is 1 of 4 tanks that we have collection. And we can put up to 60 fish in each tank. So that's pretty much the collection process from the dam to the hatchery.
So it's quite a few steps involved in getting our hands on these fish. And once once they get up to the hatchery, what do we do?
Now,
It's pretty involved.
once we get to the hatchery and we start keeping these fish, it takes them a little while to get adapted and start eating. And once they do start eating, and they develop an appetite very quickly, and they will eat all day long. I mean, as much as you feed these fish, they will eat. They could be like piranhas. It's strange to see how big and fast they will grow. But what we'll do is when we get to the hatcheries in the morning time, we have to check our numbers. We got to do all the feed and reads. So we're gonna check, put a probe in, it's called a hawk reader. We'll put that inside of our tank, and we're gonna check for saturation. We're gonna check for temperature, water temperature, and oxygen level. Now, once all the numbers check out correct and everything is good, we'll you want to check out all your tanks, make sure all your fish are inside, and do a walk around every morning. And also you have to mix up feed. Well, the type of feed that we'll use is we'll use a 50-50 mix. It could be krill and like a wheat pellets. And the krill is like a miniature shrimp. It's like a salad shrimp, small. And so you'll mix up a 50-50 mix, and then you'll put in brine shrimp eggs, just like 1 ounce of that, or even a half ounce. And you're gonna mix that up into a nice bucket. And right now we're using 2 bricks, and it's like 80 ounces per brick. So we're feeding our fish like 160 ounces of just krill per day. And to keep the fungus off of our fish. Now, if they go to the ocean, salt water, it cures and treats that fungus. But here in freshwater, if we keep these fish in freshwater, they will develop a fungus that it won't go away. It's inevitable. It's like cancer. So to stop that, we will put it's called formalin. And it's a treatment that we use every day for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Right.
And it just basically drips into the tank. It drips, and then it flushes out. And it will help treat and cure this fungus on these fish. So we'll do that every day. And in the wintertime, we actually cut back on, we'll do it every other day. But in the summertime, we do it every day because there's so many other problems that these fish can develop. I mean, water temperature being one, it's bad on our fish, water temperature. They very much prefer colder water. And
the fungus likes warm water, so
exactly. So it's a challenge. You really got to pay attention every single day to this job. A lot goes into it, and a lot of people contribute to this program. But that is our life cycle as far as treating our fish, taking care of our fish, feeding them. And at the end of the day, you put the curtain back on, and we got alarms on our tanks in case the water ever gets shut off, the pumps get shut off. We get alarms on our phones so we can send somebody out there to see what the problem is. And, we also have safety valves to where if the water gets shut off, it won't drain all the way tank till they're empty. It actually has a valve out back that you shut off, and it will keep about maybe 4 or 5 feet of water still inside the tanks. So that'll allow us to get to the tank before they breathe up all the oxygen. Now, let's say you have to put in these air stones. Let's say if the fish are breathing up all that oxygen, we have to put in these air stones and turn on the air, and that will help them breathe until we can get that water going again. Now, also, if we don't have enough oxygen in the water, we put up what's called buckets, and they're buckets full of these little Coke rings. And what the water does goes all the way to the top, and it drops down these buckets, and then it goes into the water, and it puts oxygen into the water for the fish to breathe. So there's a lot of problems, a lot of scenarios, and it's a lot of complications. But it's a lot of research, and like I said,
yeah, that's kelp reconditioning right there.
That's a lot of work to reduce the mortality rates of the steelhead and increase the survival rates. How does the kelp reconditioning contribute to the restoration and preservation of the vital kelp ecosystems in the Pacific Northwest? And how is their impact on the overall marine environment?
So this program, we've been able to actually increase the amount of repeat spawners between 15 and 150 times of what the natural level used to be. And so we've contributed quite a bit. One thing our research has found, and you've got this pit tag map in front, I'll explain in just a minute what that is, but using the pit tag analysis, we found the Nez Perce Tribes Fishery Research Department did a pit tag analysis and found out that steelhead, the percentage of fish that survive spawning and turn around and head back down out of the tributary is 80%. Of those, 90% make it to lower granite. So this life history trait is very prevalent in these fish still. That's something we didn't realize until like last year when this data was presented. We thought it was significantly lower. However, the number of successful repeat spawners is less than one half of 1%. And so our project is increasing that, even though it's a very small number, it's increasing it 15 to 150 times. And so the map you see there, it's impacting, our program is impacting populations throughout the Snake Basin. It's a very difficult map to read, but each one of those yellow pins represents a fish that we reconditioned, released, and they were able to track it into these upper tributaries, all the way up upper Salmon, Grand Ron, Clearwater, Locksaw, throughout the Snake River Basin. So it's impacting not just a few local streams, but quite a few, as you can see.
What is the furthest inland point that you have here on this map?
I think it's just under 400 miles, maybe closer to 5. I didn't do the math there. It's in the upper Salmon. I'll have to look that up. It's over 400 miles though.
Awesome.
It's the upper Salmon. Yeah. And so this was also sort of a surprise. We thought we were probably targeting a few specific locations, especially since the majority of our fish come from lower granite. We were afraid we were getting a lot of fish from just the Clearwater, but these fish came from all over and are returning all over.
Wow. And that's because they can travel back and forth several times in their lifetimes, right?
Yes, but what we're trying to do is eliminate them traveling so far. So we take out that extra trip back to the ocean. So we bring them into the hatchery, recondition them, and then where we release them is just below Lower Granite Dam, and they'll head back upstream. So it eliminated at least 600 miles of river travel, and then who knows how far they travel in the ocean. That component was eliminated all those sources of mortality, and it shrunk up the time they're out there.
What speaking of that, what are some of the key challenges faced in reconditioning both the steelhead and the kelp populations, and how are innovative approaches and technologies being utilized to address these challenges effectively?
So if you can pull up that graph of the number of fish at lower granite, I can kind of review the status of steelhead right now is really poor. Over the last 35 years, you can see the variation in the numbers there's quite a bit of variation, but if you focus on those last couple years, this graph shows both A and B run steelhead. The A run are the slightly smaller, the B run are the larger fish that return after a couple more years in the ocean. And if you look at these last few years, you can really see the B run numbers are really low. And so the challenge is getting our hands on some of these fish. If we look at the scale of this, before the lower 4 Snake River dams were put in, over 100,000 natural steelhead returned to the Snake. And so the numbers are significantly diminished. So that's a huge challenge. And what we've done is expanded our collections. Primarily, we just collected Lower Granite Dam. If you pull up that map with the collection locations, we've had to expand Lower Granite. Where we've been collecting for since we started with the program. 2020, we started at Little Goose. 2022, Lower Monumental, and Asotin Creek. And so we've had to expand all these locations in order to get our hands on these fish, and that's been a real challenge, just especially recently with those depressed numbers of steelhead. Other challenges, do you want to talk about what it takes to,
Yeah.
in the hatchery, there's other challenges.
Oh, well.
Getting them up on.
Well, we already talked about the feed, actually. Fungus, we talked about that, the parasites. Really, the water temperature that's a big thing as well. At Door Shack, they got clean, good, clear water. What they pumped out of the ground. So, whereas in PTH right now, we're pumping out of the river, so they're having river water. So the river, the quality of water right now it's like night and day.
Door Shack gets their water from behind Door Shack Dam, which is a little bit clearer where they get their source of the water. So they're just below Door Shack. So yeah, so there's challenges both getting our hands on fish and challenges of keeping those fish alive.
Sometimes remember we ran out of feed that one time, we ran out of half of krill, so we was only having to feed with just pellets. So in other times where we got lack of hands, people that workers. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges. It ain't just the fishing.
What did you do when you ran out of feed? How did you solve that solution?
Well, we continue just feeding them more and more pellets. And these fish, they can actually fast for a little while. They don't have to eat every single day. They can actually fast for like months. So I was surprised to see that as well. But if you were to throw krill in there compared to pellets, I mean, they will just eat up all the krill and leave the pellets. So you can definitely tell their favorite food. But what I forgot to talk about also is that these steelhead they can go 5 times the trip back and forth from their tributaries all the way back down to the ocean. So they're crossing over a lot of dams, and they get a lot of damage to these fish. I see them with a lot of head wounds and a lot of scratches and a lot of bird damage, and you start seeing with eel bites, and you start seeing fungus on these fish. Some of their fins are rotting off, and it makes them hard to swim. Some of them's got hooks, and they've been biting on bait, and they've been hooked in jaws. And I mean, these fish have been through a lot, and I tell you, steelhead they're strong. I've been impressed. For years, I thought salmon was a strong fish. But after working with this program, you see that the things that the steelhead have to go through from point A to point B, they got a lot of heart.
Sure. Yes, some of the coastal streams, they've documented a repeat spawning up to 5 times. Typically, we don't see it more than 2 or 3 times this far inland, but for obvious reasons, it's just such a long trip to make.
Yeah, they go through a lot. You're talking about what, 10,000 babies per drop?
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, they could drop 50,000 babies over the period of their lifetime.
How long does it take them?
So a typical round trip, they spawn in the spring. They turn around and head. If we didn't intercept them, they turn around, head out to the ocean, and they'd be out there for usually 2 years before they turn around and head back in. So usually we wouldn't see a repeat spawner at this tributary for 2 years.
How is success measured in steelhead and kelp reconditioning initiatives, and what are the future goals and aspirations for these projects in terms of population recovery and ecological restoration?
So one of the biggest measurements for our program, we're an aquaculture program, is survival in the hatchery, making sure those fish are taken well care of. So that's a huge measurement, making sure we don't have high mortality on these fish that we bring in. We also want to produce rematuring fish. Getting them to survive is one thing, but getting them to reproduce those eggs, remature, that's another thing. And we take blood hormone samples to detect where they are in their maturation stage. Some fish, as I mentioned earlier, will be ready to spawn that year. Some wait another year, and we can tell that through these blood hormone assays. They take them. The University of Idaho helps with that. And then if you pull up that image of the fish in, fish out, kind of show what we're starting out with and what we hope to finish with. So top picture is a picture of a fish that we took in at Lower Granite. The lower image is a fish that's been reconditioned and ready to be released. And you can see the drastic change between that first fish, very skinny, saggy belly. She's spawned, her eggs have all dropped. And now Neil he's holding another female that's full of eggs. You can see belly's all sagging around his hand. And she'll be quite the trophy when she gets back out in the water. So releasing those rematuring fish, and then just having enough. And actually, we got a picture of a release. It's our final photo. If you can pull that up with a Kemo holding the hose. Yeah, there we go. That's what we're really after right there. Releasing a lot of big fish back to the river. This location is just below, about a mile below Lower Granite Dam. And at this particular time, we had 50 fish in that tank. And we were able to release it back into the wild. And hopefully that fish will turn around, head right back upstream and do what comes natural. And typically, about half of these fish are detected at the dam within about a week or so, and another portion are detected throughout the next few months heading upstream. So that's our real measure of success, getting these fish back out into the river to spawn.
That looks cold.
Yeah, you can tell he's wearing neoprene and a hat. This is one of the later releases too. This is like November. Typically, we kind of shoot for late October. I think you asked questions about our future here. We actually have a proposed new kelp reconditioning facility, and it's been approved. The funding's been approved. It's scheduled to be built on the campus of the Nez Perce Travel Hatchery. It's a building with a bunch of tanks. Currently, Bonneville has put out the construction for bids, and we're hoping to get that built in the next couple of years, and it'll have the capacity of reconditioning up to 750 fish. So quite a bit larger than the scale we have right now.
Wow. And so that is Orfino?
Cherry Lane.
Cherry Lane. Speaking of getting everything in place for building that new hatchery, that kind of leads into our next question. How are different stakeholders, including governmental agencies, nonprofit organizations, and research institutions collaborating on the steelhead and kelp reconditioning projects, and what are the benefits of such collaborative conservation strategies?
So Bonneville Power Administration funds it, and CRIDFIC, the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, is actually coordinates several different kelp reconditioning programs. We have them here at the Nez Perce, Warm Springs. There's one in Omak with the Colvilles, and then the big one is the Yakima Nation. And you talk about collaboration. We've learned a lot. They've been doing the reconditioning quite a bit longer than the Nez Perce. And we've learned a lot of their aquaculture techniques on how to get these fish to feed, how to get these fish taken care of, controlling fungus. And so collaborating with those other tribes has been a huge benefit. And when you talk about research institutions, the University of Idaho does our blood plasma work. They do all the fish physiology for our program. They take the analysis and they're able to tell us what fish is ready to spawn again. So yeah, we work with in the past we worked with the Idaho Department of Fish and Game getting fish out of the Locksaw. They have some tributary weirs that we're able to get fish out of. And then just recently we've been working with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they've given us access to some weirs at Soton Creek. And we've last couple of years we've gotten a few fish out of those locations. So we've got federal, tribal, and state all working together and moving forward on this.
Wow. Do you have suggestions on where our listeners who are interested in delving deeper into the topic of steelhead and kelp reconditioning, ongoing efforts with the Salmon Orca Project, where they can find reputable sources or resources or organizations to learn more and support these vital conservation efforts and initiatives?
It's a great question. What I found to be a very good location, it's a very good clearinghouse for some information on kelts, is www.critfic.org. Type in kelt in the search bar at the top, and you'll get everything from annual reports to research findings to presentations that we've done over the last 20 years. They have a lot of information there at Critfic on their website, and it's super easy to find them. I just looked up an annual report this morning, so that's where I would start. And they have other collaborators listed on that site too, with some of the nonprofits that are involved, not just in kelp reconditioning, but a handful of other fisheries projects.
Awesome. Well, that concludes the list of questions that I have for you both. And I am really thankful that you guys took the time out of your day to join us and teach us about what the Steelhead Kelt Project is and where the future of it is heading and how it helps the ecosystem for the survival rates of our steelhead, and how important it is for us in the Nez Perce tribe and to our tribal fishermen. So I really want to thank you, Scott Everett and Kemo Scott, for joining us.
Thanks.
It's been really fun learning about the steelhead and the survival of the kelt and how you're able to overcome all these different challenges to help them survive and bring them from the far areas and bring them closer to the ocean so that they can survive faster, survive longer.
Well, thank you, Angela, for having us.
Thank you. And so I would like to invite our speakers to come back next month and keep a lookout for our next speaker series for the Salmon Orca speaker series. And thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Let's see.